Welcome to everybody. I know just how busy people's diaries are, particularly on a Monday morning, but thank you for taking the time out to come and join us for this session today, which is a continuation of the Lunch and Learn series covering a range of issues around equality, diversity and inclusion, and all topics being covered through the NFCC's People Programme. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, and you can do that in one of two ways. You can either post a question in the chat bar, and I'll be keeping an eye on that, or you can put your hand up in the usual way and ask a question at the end of the session. I will hold all the questions until the end of the session. There will be some time at the end rather than interrupting Jax as we go along. We'll let the session flow and do the Q&A right at the back end. So this session celebrates Black History Month and will be covered by our guest speaker. Delighted to welcome Jax Effiong, who's the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. Hi, Jax. And many people on the call will know Jax, will have undoubtedly met Jax, or if you haven't, I know that you're going to be inspired by what Jax is going to talk about for the next hour or so. Manchester Fire is just one of the many hats that Jax is involved with. She's a long and distinguished CV. I won't go through it all now, and Jax might cover some of this in her presentation anyway, but is superbly placed to support fire service around inclusion and equality. So this year's focus is in line with the national theme for Black History Month around saluting our sisters. So at that point, I'm going to step aside and I'm going to welcome Jax to the NFCC Lunch and Learn event. Thanks very much, Jax.
Thank you so much, Mark, as well. Thanks for that introduction. It's lovely to be here for this Lunch and Learn for NFCCC. As Mark said, I'm Jax Effiong. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the D&I manager for CA and Fire. Also part of the NFCC EDI project board, and I've just been actually promoted as chair of LGBT Foundation, which is based in Manchester but covers a lot of other areas around the UK. So it's lovely to be here this afternoon. When I was asked, I thought, well, I'm really best coming at it from my perspective to do with Black History Month and saluting our sisters. But I just thought it was a great opportunity to kind of look at the theme, which is a crucial role for Black women, and they've played and shaped history, inspiring change and building communities. This year's celebration showcases pioneering Black women who have made a remarkable contribution to society. And today I salute some of the sisters that have inspired me. But I just wanted to say, we did mention triggering or triggers, that actually to come to this space with kindness, I'm a little bit nervous. It's only a human trait when you're speaking to so many people. And I love doing in-person discussions and conversations. But at any point, if you need to raise anything, if you can do that with Sunny, that'd be great. If you can't hear me at any point. But it's coming together with kindness over the next hour. This is a space of safety, respect, honesty, but it's also about stretch. But again, I reiterate, it's my perspective. I'm going to be sharing some of my lived experience. So this is only one lens, but it's my lens that I share with you today. And I just wanted a quote from LGBT History Month as well this year, which is about, for me, it's really poignant for Black History Month as well, because it's about claiming our past, creating our present and creating our future. And I couldn't go any further without just mentioning a lovely statement that our Race and Faith Network shared with us in the workplace last week. And for me, I just wanted to read this out for us just as a start for 10. So over the past couple of weeks, we have been struggling, as have many of our members, and we wanted to remind you that we're here for you and to be there for each other. Whether you are friends or family in Israel and Palestine, or you are an ally to people affected by the conflict, these last few weeks have been very difficult for all of us. The rise in hate crimes in the UK and Greater Manchester against the Jewish and Muslim population have been stark and meant that our members have been dealing with this, or the fear of it, on top of everything else. Thinking about this, please be mindful that some colleagues and members might need more space and support at the moment, and give some kind words because they go a long way. Our group hopes that the conflict will soon come to an end, like everybody does, to a peaceful resolution, and that all parties involved work together to achieve justice, security and dignity of all people. So thank you for listening to that, and please look after each other. Introduce myself with my pronouns today, and I do that intentionally every time I meet new people or we're in a meeting, and I think it's really important to actually introduce pronouns. You can see I've actually shared our badge there, so we've actually had it as an offer within our organisation, so that if people want to share pronouns, they can do. And I think for me, because some specific pronouns like he, him, she, her that are commonly associated with specific gender, using these to describe somebody can indicate that you're assuming their gender based on appearance. And what we want to say is, if we welcome all genders, we're saying this is a very small way to say everybody is welcome here today. So how do I bring my whole self to work? And I just want to take you on a little story, really, about who I am. So this is my grandfather. This is my grandfather, Oaken Bassi Effiong, who moved to this country in the 40s, like my other grandparents. My other 3 grandparents are from Ireland. So all came to this country for a better life for their family, and actually really give us a staple kind of foundation as Mancunians going forward. And I think one thing about my identity around being mixed race as something that has impacted my life and made me who I am today, a lot of it is positive, but a lot of it is you kind of wake up to the experience of racism from a very early age, whether it's from within family or from the community around you. And some of that can be in your school life or college life or when you're studying. And I think for me, my mixed race experience really gave me an awareness at an early age of difference and also of injustice. And it's something that actually made me passionate about injustices from an early age. So that's a big part of who I am. This is my brother. He lives in Australia. He's called Zenko, and he moved there many years ago with his family. And this is me when I got to an age where I started fighting back. I went to Manchester Polytechnic, which is not there anymore, it's MMU. And this was when we started fighting back against Clause 28 or Section 28, which was prohibiting any trainer or teacher to actually promote anything to do with our LGBTQ plus community. And at the time, I was appalled by that. How could you stunt those voices? And this was me starting to step up. I was about 20 there, starting to step up to have a voice, to fight back, but doing it in a way to actually start to influence change. And that's when I started learning and being more aware about how can we do that? How can we do it together? How can we support our different communities? And that led me on to one of my first professional careers, which was an outdoor pursuits instructor, actually. But I used that platform to really engage with different groups across Greater Manchester. And we used to run our Black and Asian women's groups on a regular basis. And that was a space, and it was a kind space, to actually bring women and girls together, and to actually have fun, have time out from maybe some of their struggles and challenges that they were facing across Greater Manchester. And they were awesome sessions that I really enjoyed. And I take those memories and that learnings with me into today. And moving even further on was, I think, what inspired me to recognise my own leadership skills was actually going on empowerment programmes. And I think that's what's great about Fire and Rescue Service, is they offered so much training. They offer so many opportunities and pathways to learn and to feel inspired. And so we are partners with Stonewall UK, and we do our Workplace Equality Index submission each year. But they run so many other platforms that connects people together. And it's called an empowerment programme, but it was so empowering about my leadership and how to influence change within my organisation. And this is way before I became the EDI manager. And I think one thing that I've learned is about identifying allies in the workplace. It's so important to connect with others. We shouldn't have to feel isolated in the workplace. And I think I learned very early on, actually, to identify those wonderful people within the workplace who are allies. And I think for the organisation, they put a platform in place where we could connect and grow and come together. And I'm forever grateful to our organisation for that. They see the purpose in being together and that connectedness and that networking within the organisation. And we're still doing that to this day. But this is where we get our strength from. I call it our soul food when we come together. And this is the Race and Faith Network and the Rainbow Network and some of our partners coming together. And we still do that on a regular basis. I think that leads me on to intersection. And I think My experience of being mixed race, being a woman, being a lesbian woman of colour, I think I was a carer as a young person, and so many other things that have affected my life. When I actually identified the concept that Professor Kimberly Crenshaw created in 1989, which was intersectionality, I was so really happy with this, because I used to describe myself as living on different planets in my teens when I was looking at my identity and where I belonged. And I think intersectionality just gave me a real strong sense of belonging, actually, because class, race, sexual orientation, age, disability, and gender, they don't exist separately from each other, but are complexly interwoven together. And I thought, that's me. That's who I am, and we all are. We all have an intersection with a range of our identities and our values and beliefs. And Audre Lorde, who is a Black lesbian activist, one of her quotes was, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live single issue lives." And it meant so much to me. I think it's so powerful. And I actually give it my own little term, and I call it my rainbow layer cake. And it's something that I always talk about when I'm a human book as well for an organisation, and I talk about my rainbow layer cake a lot. But it's a really good theory when we're looking at actually equality and inclusion, is looking at our agenda through an intersectional lens. But before I move on to my sheroes, I want you to take a moment to think about who are the sheroes in your lives. I think it's really important through the next half an hour or so, if you can think of who your shero is, who's the woman of colour in your life, who you've inspired you, motivated you. It could be someone really famous. It could be someone in your family. It could be a next door neighbour. It could be someone in your community or in the workplace. But I really want you to take this time to think about who your shero is over the next half an hour. And I'm going to be sharing some of the women that have inspired me in my everyday. So, who are my sheroes? I've got to start with Philip Oku. And Philip Oku, we salute you today, aka Lady Phil. And Lady Phil is the co-founder and executive director of UK Black Pride. And UK Black Pride has been established now for 18 years in the UK. And this is an absolutely fantastic organisation and celebrate. And they meet once a year in London, but do a lot of other key events throughout the year for people of colour who belong to the LGBTQ plus community. And what Lady Phil says is we have to ensure that history months are not just decorative. We must look at our history, her story and their story, our activism, the struggles we are battling and navigating, and the opportunity to view them through this lens is really important. We must reflect on the way we amplify ours and other voices. We must eradicate and dismantle structural and systemic LGBTQ plus phobias, but also racism, sexism and misogyny too. We must work to erase the discrimination against people with disabilities, organise against poverty young people face on the day-to-day basis, and to stop the hate fuelled against people of faith. So Lady Phil is just one of my icons. I get a lot of my inspiration from her speeches and from her kind of learning. So I salute Philip Oku today. I also want to salute Alison Malak. Alison Malak's a local EDI provider. And I mentioned human book, so I'm a human book for Alison, and actually I've done that for a few years, and I think it was the way Alison said, actually we learn a lot through stories, and that was a massive impact, because actually a lot of the time we leave ourselves at home and actually go to work with a different hat on, and Alison pretty much taught me that actually we're our whole selves every day. You bring your values and beliefs into that workplace, how you feel that day, what your conversations are led by. So I want to thank Alison. Also, Alison does Let's Talk About Racism as an e-learning package that Alison designed for our organisation, for all our staff to connect. It's an e-learning package that people can listen to and work through when they have the time to do it. And also, she has done courageous conversation training for us, and has supported our equality impact assessment kind of tools and processes within the organisation. So there's a lot of things that Alison brings to the table, but also things around her own identity as being a Jewish woman, Chinese, and also Black. So she has a range of her own experiences as well as disability, and talks about her story a lot. So I know Alison won't mind me giving her a shout out today. And that's CD UK, and they're based in Bury, they're based in Greater Manchester. So a huge thank you. Alison also leads an anti-racist book club, and we meet every month to talk about a new book about anti-racist practice, and it's a really good way of learning and sharing together. I want to give a shout out to Sunita Gamblin. Sunita Gamblin QPM. QPM is the Queen's Police Medal and was awarded to Sunita. Sunita is now the co-chair of our Culture First board. And wow, what an inspiration. I've not known Sunita that long really in her current role as co-chair of Culture First board, but always takes the time out to give me a call, send me a text, make sure I'm okay. And I think for me, just having that kind of connection with someone in a senior role is just really important. It really empowers individuals. So I want to say thank you to Sunita today, and also the inspiration and energy she's bringing into our organisation. Also, Hamira Ahmed, who's our co-chair of our Race and Faith Staff Network, who actually I've seen grow and develop, and now I'm inspired by Hamira and what she brings to the Race and Faith Staff Network and into her day-to-day role as well in our talent and resource team. But you'll see there we've got our Chief Fire Officer, Dave Russell, who's our biggest ally in Fire and Rescue Service and in the Combined Authority, and also Carl Petch, who has a co-chair of our Race and Faith Network. Carl's took some time to reflect on Black History Month, and he really wanted to salute his two daughters as well. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that with Carl. So his daughters come from a strong female bloodstream, which includes his nanas. And I just think it was lovely that he connects and celebrates the women around him as well. That makes him the person he is. And I couldn't have today's session without saluting Halima and Akeisha. Halima and Akeisha are our very own EDI coordinators in the Combined Authority and Manchester Fire. And over the 2 years, they have actually, the drive and the commitment that they've shared across the organisation and really invested themselves in our learning. So Halima supported our staff networks and went on to actually help design the race equality strategy for the Combined Authority, which is absolutely fantastic. And for Akeisha, has actually reached well over 1,000 of our staff delivering inclusive culture training and actually reaching out that connection, that network, and has just been amazing for our organisation. So thank you for your passion. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your knowledge. Yeah, and absolutely thank you for sharing yourselves over the past couple of years with us. And some wonderful women actually outside of our organisation that supports Manchester Fire so much is Joy and Yusarian, and I definitely want to salute you today. We salute you. So they lead on the Fireworks National Staff Network, just launched the Black Members National Network as well. They go the extra mile. They really kind of reach people nationally, and they supported us recently with our Power Staff Network conference and came and saluted their very own sisters for Black History Month. So I want to give back today and say thank you so much. Thanks for sharing you. And what Joy says is passion. She has a passion for fairness and equality, and she supports people in marginalised communities and initiated successful projects to improve people's lives. Joy is proud of her achievements in this role and feels blessed to have changed so many people's lives for the better. Joy's mission statement: show visibility, integrity, and do the right thing for all, especially when no one is watching. And that's so powerful. And for Yasarian, its focus stems from a genuine desire to foster positive change in the lives of individuals and communities. As a driving force behind the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service Multicultural Staff Support Network, Yasarian champions a culture of inclusivity and support. Serving as the Vice Chair for the National Staff Networks Forum, Yasarian has pioneered the National Black Fire Service Members Network, focused on connection, collaboration, and addressing the critical issue of reducing Black deaths by suicide. So for me, I just really want to give a shout out to these awesome women and the change that you've made for us within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. I hope that's inspired you to think about who your heroes are today. But I'm going to move on now to the so what. So what do we all do and why do we do it for? So it's just bringing us back to Manchester and why we do what we do in Greater Manchester. So since 2018, we signed a pledge for race equality. We signed a pledge with 24 other local authorities and key agencies across Greater Manchester, a pledge that we would make a difference. It was a promise, and it was a promise that we hold on to really dearly 5 years on. And I think we've been on a journey, haven't we, over the past 5 years? There's been so many poignant moments and so much impact in our communities, especially if we think of the COVID and the impact of COVID, Black Lives Matter, and I could go on, but actually it's had a massive impact around our learning. And one thing that came out of the pledge was a commissioned piece of work. And this commissioned piece of work was developed so that we can develop a strategy for the future. It's also led by our Greater Manchester Race Equality Panel in Greater Manchester. So we have several equality panels. And the commissioned work was facilitated by the Centre of Dynamics of Ethnicity Code from the University of Manchester. But one of their recommendations, there's many recommendations when they looked at the inequalities and the impact of COVID, but one was to develop a CA race equality strategy backed by a plan to increase representation of Black and Asian minorities in senior positions in the combined authority, and to tackle race inequality in health, education, policing, work and housing. And actually, I really feel the kind of promise that came from that. So that really influences the work that we do across the combined authority and across Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. And that strategy is out for consultation, our new race equality strategy. And once that's completed as well, it'll really underpin the work that we're doing across Greater Manchester. But we've utilised that as well as other many influencing forces that actually designed our fire plan 21-25. That was led by our Chief Fire Officer, Dave Russell. And each year we launch an annual delivery plan. And this is our third annual delivery plan, and its publication marks the midpoint of our 4-year fire plan. I can really feel that sense of movement within our organisation and how we've actually really embedded inclusion with everything that we do. Culture is so important for all of us, with culture plans, with some key reports that have really opened our eyes recently across the country. And for us, this is us committing, and we've always had that commitment, but now this is moving us forward. And our priority 5 is that develop a culture of excellence, equality and inclusivity within our fire plan. And again, these are documents that you can find, but we're happy to share. And it's about our commitment and our pledge to embrace an inclusive culture within Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. And how do we bring equality alive within the organisation that underpins that fire plan? Well, we have an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, which actually lives the same kind of lifetime as the fire plan. And we bring that alive through an action plan each year. And you can see I've put some logos there that actually really influence, again, our action plan. Obviously, the inspection, we're all waiting for the outcome of our reports. Our National Fire Chiefs Council culture plan. And I must point out here as well that AFSA Smoke and Mirrors report. When I first became EDI manager 4 years ago, that was a really, really strong piece of evidence that I take with me even to today around actually how do we challenge, how do we address inequalities in the workplace. So I must give a big shout out to AFSA for that. And that's how we've developed some of these key points. We have 14 actions in the action plan, and these are just some of those key points that are related to racial equity. We're also kind of influenced by our White Ribbon accreditation. We're just going into our 2nd year of being White Ribbon accredited, and we will look at tackling misogyny in the workplace and do that with bringing everybody along with us. We're also influenced by Stonewall and our Workplace Equality Index, and also our Disability Confidence Scheme commitment. And that's just a few different influences. I think it was really important to actually showcase what we're doing around racial equity. So we really want to amplify the work and the voices of our staff networks by giving them support. Our senior sponsors support our networks by resources, by learning, by education, and making sure staff have the time to meet. So we have an attendance guidance document actually that supports managers in giving staff time out to attend staff network activity. We also want to motivate the workforce to challenge prejudice, be alert to discrimination no matter the scale, and we do that through our inclusive culture training, through our lunch and learns, through our learning at work weeks, through just celebrating learning across the organisation through key campaigns and events throughout the year. And we also want to further develop zero tolerance policies and ensure all employers are aware of these policies, but also understand zero tolerance and don't be afraid of what that means. It's actually, we need to celebrate that an organisation is standing up to actually support staff within the organisation. We want to ensure mechanisms are in place for employers to report racism and discrimination in a safe and supportive manner. And we don't say that lightly, because actually it's really, really, you have to be brave to report some of the behaviours within an organisation. So we'll continue to deliver anti-racist practice training programmes and roll it out across the organisation. And this is after the successful completion of anti-racist practice training last year by our senior leadership team. And it was delivered by someone called Martha Awajobi. And it was a really good journey that our senior leaders went on. And we've got a lot of actions out of that, as well as this, to design our own 5-year action plan. So that's a really exciting piece of work that we're going to be developing this year. We want to foster good relationships and address bias across the organisation through regular connectivity, through campaigns, events and workshops. And we do complete, like all of us, complete our national gender and also our race equality pay gap report. And we complete a workplace race equality standards report. That's just being reviewed at the moment. But it's for that continual learning within the organisation, so people feel safe, but also people get job satisfaction out of their workplaces and can celebrate who they are every day. And also we do monitor HR disciplinary grievances themes. We have a Freedom to Speak Up platform. We actually have 2 Freedom to Speak Up platforms now for everyone to be able to speak truth to power through these platforms across the organisation. And we also look at exit interviews and make sure people can have a voice and go to a range of different people when they are leaving the organisation. So there's a lot of learning that we're doing, and I just really wanted to call that out, because actually this is our commitment in our action plan, and we review our action plan each year and we'll make further improvements. Some of them will move on and develop and stay the same because they're quite big pieces of work, but it just shows our commitment in our organisation about racial equity in the workplace. Nothing can be done without individuals in the workplace. Nothing can be done without us being active in the workplace. And this is all of us. And I think the people here today are here because they're interested in this narrative, interested in giving space as a lunch and learn. And we need to move forward and actually reach the people across our organisations that are not here today, that are not active in the workplace as allies, and actually try and bring someone else with us as well on this journey. And I think it's really our responsibility to be active as allies. So some of the prompts I've put here is talk openly about inequalities and current affairs with colleagues, check in, make sure individuals are okay, understand and discuss behaviours and banter, including microaggressions and incivilities. Understand steps to effectively challenge and how to do that, how to challenge and how to do interventions with individuals or with groups of people. Challenge any derogatory comments or banter about people's characteristics firmly and immediately, but that comes with confidence. You know, sometimes you have to think, how do I do that? But we have to find safe ways of being able to call out when we see or think we feel or hear discrimination. Utilise your Freedom to Speak Up model that works in your service Some of you may have a freedom to speak up model. And I know we had a lunch and learn last month as well, where we shared our freedom to speak up models in our service. Ensure appropriate support mechanisms are in place. This is so important that everyone has got the HR system, the people services, the wellbeing teams, peer mentors, staff networks. Put a range of support mechanisms in place where people can reach out to others. Hopefully it can be their colleague next to them and it can be their local manager, but we need a range of platforms so people feel supported. And promote the top tips to being an active bystander and an inclusive ally. Get it up there on a board, get it on a big poster. Some people, all of us, need ways, we need examples of how to learn and how to test out what feels good to us when we're looking at inclusive culture. And make sure we recognise and celebrate difference. We have a wonderful diverse calendar that we share across the whole organisation and beyond. And it's about looking at and recognising difference and trying to make the time for that. And this is a quote: don't be afraid to try and fail. Be afraid of not trying. My journey hasn't been an easy one over the past 4 years. Bringing my whole self to work has been very emotional, and I need the support, and I have the support within my organisation to lean on. So for me, we have to be brave to make those next steps. We have to be brave to call out. We have to be brave when we want to make a better workplace. And it is about communication. It is about learning. It is about conversation. It is about over a brew, a cup of tea and a piece of toast at a water cooler. Talk about inclusion. Let's usualize these conversations. It's so important. And the more we do, the more we'll embed it and usualize it as good practice within our organizations. And Angela Davis says, in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. So this is about stepping up. This is about actually doing something with our learning. So individually, learn about other people's lived experiences and educate yourself. Understand your own privilege. I understand my privilege. I know that light isn't always white, but it gives me a lot of privilege. I know that. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of my level of management within the organisation. I have a lot of privilege. I have a lot of autonomy in the work that I do. So it's about sharing that privilege, and it's about looking alongside you and bringing someone with you on your journey. It's really important that that pathway for progression is there within the organisation. So interpersonally amplify marginalised voices and challenge behaviour. So actually look around your workplaces, look around your communities. What more can you do to amplify those voices and increase visibility? It's so important. And structurally, for our senior leads, for our kind of processes, creating equitable policies and processes. We have so much bureaucracy, don't we, that we have to work through that a lot of the time when we want to change. So actually getting the key people that look after structure is really important to get them on side. And that's our senior leaders. So make sure we've got a pathway and a voice to our senior leaders in the workplace. And this is a quote from Tasha. It's an anti-racist resource guide. And Tasha says, racism, this is a lifelong work that we choose to enter into, a journey for an anti-racist traveller that will take a lifetime. There's no quick wins here, but it's a journey. And I think what we need to do, we can celebrate the quick wins, but we have to continue and keep going on that journey. If we think about racism, well over 400 years, that term racism has just been embedded and seeped in our society and in other societies. So it's going to take us a long time to move us into racial equity, but we can do it together. We can absolutely do that. One person can make a huge difference. And this is the way we bring our intersectional lens into practice. Just one example of many. We've just had our third Power Staff Network conference, and it's our key kind of flagship event really for inclusion to do with intersectional lens in Manchester. Had our third conference, and we're just going to go bigger and better. I do have to do a shout out to Chief Fire Officer Wayne Brown, who actually attended and was our key speaker. But you can see we've got our beautiful new brand. Got to mention our logos for our networks there in the bottom, and that's thanks to our comms department as well, who support the work that we do. But This is possible because we come together, our people services team, my manager, Sue Matthews, and some other key people across the organisation support the work that we do because they know it's important. They know this actually brings job satisfaction to all of us. We're going to produce more. We're going to keep our communities a lot safer if we're happy in our workplace and we can bring our whole self to work. It's so important. I've just got a couple of minutes left. So I just wanted to share my points about self-care. Self-care is actually, we couldn't do this work without self-care. We have to recharge our batteries. We have to take time out to reflect so that we can learn to do that continuous improvement. And I wanted to mention the term weathering because we need to know and care about this term. Weathering refers to the increased likelihood of early health deterioration of Black people and people of colour, mostly due to mental, physical stresses caused by a lifetime of enduring racism. So it's a fact, it's a theory, there's evidence out there about that. So we have to care for each other and we have to look at ourselves through intersectional lenses when we're looking at mental health and well-being. And I've put time to dance there. So this is my wife. We've been together for 23 years. We have 2 amazing daughters. And we take time to dance. We take time out to walk the dog. We take time out to reflect on workplace and switch it off and just be together and be with our chosen family and friends. And I give a lot of my time at LGBT Foundation and now as the new chair. That's how I get release, is having a volunteering activity, which gives back to my community. It's so important. And this picture is us of jumping the broom, which is a time-honoured wedding tradition we kept during our wedding ceremony. And the act for us symbolised a new beginning, sweeping away the past and a show of respect to our family ancestors in Nigeria, India, Lithuania and Ireland. And that just shows actually how far we've progressed around inclusion, but we've still got such a long way to go. I just wanted to come off the screen now after sharing my story and open it up to us to have a discussion, if that's okay with everyone.
I mean, I'd start off, Jax, just by saying thanks very much. I mean, that was a wonderfully pitched presentation, really inspiring. I really like the kind of way you approach the story, everything from your grandfather sat with you in his arms on the sofa all the way through to your personal reflections and then into the organisational learning piece. And then the work you were doing with Wayne Brown and others just a couple of weeks ago, I know. So really liked the presentation. And there were a couple of things that sort of just jumped out from me, just some reflections back initially, really. So I think you used the term soul food as that kind of recharging your batteries and the inspiration you get from colleagues. Really liked that. And also the rainbow layer cake aspect of the intersectional piece as well. So there's a food theming emerging in here in the presentation, and it's something that sort of caught my attention in terms of bringing stuff to life, to be honest. So there's a kind of humorous element to it, but also there's some learning in there as well. You'll see in the chat bar now you have a kind of opportunity outside of the presentation. There are a sea of hearts in the chat bar and a couple of people who've shared others as well in terms of people reflecting on their own sheroes when you invited us to do so. So thank you for inviting us to do that. I was really struck when you talked about Greater Manchester and the delivery plan and things like that, the extent to which this is being captured as an organisational responsibility within your service, and that being reflected with inclusion right at the heart of the delivery plan. And it's really encouraging to see that sort of stuff. And then sort of towards the back end of your presentation, really liked that piece around the active nature of this and that personal responsibility that everybody has, whether it's allyship or whatever else it might be. And those 9 really tangible, practical examples in your slide around how to create that active allyship, I think was great as well. So at that point, I'm going to invite people just to use your way, put your hands up if you've got any questions for Jax or just an observation on the presentation or something that you'd like to discuss. So let's not be shy and see who comes forward, or equally, by all means, put something in the chat bar if you'd rather pose a question in the chat bar and I'll pick that up. I've got one, Jax, just to get us going, and that was It sort of picks up on that quote you used at the end, and I haven't got this quote quite right, but about the only thing being afraid of is, frankly, not trying. And we talk a lot about active allyship, active bystander, and a raft of different terminology. And I've seen and been involved, and probably in the past not challenged enough, examples where I or other colleagues should have stepped into a space, and people don't for a whole range of reasons, whether that's around confidence, whether it's competence, or whether it's just your kind of capability to feel like you're the person who can do that, and often thinking, frankly, somebody else will do it. It's someone else's responsibility in the room. Someone will step into this place, and of course, frequently people don't. So, just interested, drawing out those kind of 9 bullet point piece of advice you had. Just interested in some of the success, or even some of the times it's not gone quite so well. Trying to create that culture and environment in Manchester right now, or perhaps you've had experience of that outside of the fire service as well.
I think to me it's a really good point, isn't it? Because there is a theory around the bystander effect, and it's about everyone waiting for somebody else to step up, or thinking actually somebody else is better than me to actually deal with this situation. So in most cases it comes from a humble place. It comes from a place where people don't want to hurt each other. People actually do want to come to work with kindness and are mortified if they've actually hurt another person in the workplace. So I think sometimes we don't call out because maybe we're afraid that we'll get it wrong. We're afraid that we're going to actually cause more harm than good. And that bystander effect is, I'll let somebody else more professional than me deal with it. And I think what we've got to do is just bring it right back to us as an individual and don't wait for somebody else. But that comes with confidence. And through our inclusive culture training, we have rich conversations, and those conversations is, what would you do if? And we have some scenarios, and everyone comes to it from different lenses to do with their values and beliefs. And I think for me, what I'm seeing in our organisation is staff starting to be more brave. So for example, I got a phone call from a watch last month, and it was like, Jack, can you come and have a chat and a brew with our watch? Kind of struggling with inclusive language a little bit. We want to know some of the difference between, I called my watch my lads, and it was a watch manager, and he says, and he was called up for it, which I thought was awesome that someone actually challenged them in saying, these are my lads. And we just had a really good conversation. So it could be something as light touch as bringing someone else in to have a brew and a bicky and talking about what that means. And for me, we had a conversation about family. And I think sometimes we call our fire and rescue service our family as a term of endearment, but we all know that families can be dysfunctional. We know actually in the LGBTQ plus community, we get familial rejection and have to choose our families a lot of the time. So when you say family, it means different things to different people. There's also could be a very strict hierarchy in family, and there is within fire and rescue service. But we have to steer on the positives. It's about that kindness, that support, that kind of inspiration, that motivation to learn is embedded in family. And that was the kind of conversation we had. And I says, well, calling your watch your lads, actually you've put them in a different place. You've put them in a place in your family that they've got to, it's kind of like, be quiet, be seen and not heard. And I think the challenge was, it was kind of trying to control that watch. And so we had a really good discussion about the impact of language and how people actually pick it up from a different lens depending on their values and beliefs and understanding. That's one example.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much for that, Jax. I think we've got a slightly shy audience this morning because there aren't that many hands going up or chats in the bar. But I've got another question, Jax. Actually, fantastic. Well done, David Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit biased because I'm from Greater Manchester as well. But I just wanted to say that as a white man who can often feel as if I might get things wrong, that what Jackson and other members of the EDI groups within Greater Manchester have created is a safe environment, so that as long as people are wanting to learn, you can't really say the wrong thing. As long as there is the intention is there to to try and understand, then that is the important thing. And that is really sort of key to, I think, these discussions, and people to feel as if they can develop themselves without making a mistake that they can never step back from. So I think that's really important. It's all credit to the way that it's been set up by Jax and everybody else, really, and their patience with us.
Thanks very much for that, David. Jax, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to come in with your Manchester
I did,
yeah.
and for me, I just want to give a big up to Dave Wilson, actually, because we launched our EDI box, EDI single point of contacts, about 3 years ago in the organisation, and it's a platform where we come together bi-monthly and people can sign up to be an EDI Spock. There's a terms of reference, and we've got well over, I think, about 130 EDI Spocks now across 41 fire stations. And so they take on that role of actually being the role model for EDI locally. And Dave as well, for a lot of reasons, he's definitely one of our active allies and an EDI Spock, and more, even more now, as has been promoted across the organisation, but has always been there. And I think there's key individuals and allies that you identify early on in the organisation that can actually support the journey alongside us, so we're not in isolation. And we actually have many, many people now who've stepped up as ambassadors and champions for our White Ribbon campaign, but also as EDI Spocks across the organisation. So just a big shout out to David, really, for his continuous support. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jax. Thank you, Dave. I've got Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Jax, firstly, massive thank you. I met you at Stevenage at the AFSA thing very, very briefly. You won't remember me, Jax, and that's absolutely fine. What I did take from then and now is, in the room, you'd got such a presence, and your story today has just kind of, I suppose, reinforced that presence, I guess. And the thing I'm going to take away from it, so there's no question here, the thing I'm going to take away from it on a Monday morning, though, is I'm completely humbled by what you've said in your story and what you've shared. I think it's a privilege to have had that shared with me, so I feel very privileged from that. I also feel inspired on a Monday. I've got a week ahead of me that I know what's ahead, and I feel suitably challenged as a senior leader in my own organisation about there's no room for complacency. I think some of the challenges we have, though, that some of the colleagues and what you've done in there is things like accountability at all levels. I think people have got lots of mission statements and pledges and everything else, but I do find the sector is still struggling for accountability at all levels. And that is certainly something that is a challenge here. And David said something as well about the fear of getting it wrong. And I still have a culture here where a lot of people would rather say nothing because they're worried about getting it wrong and worried about getting in trouble. And that's certainly something around that blame-free culture that I'm certainly trying to work really hard on. But ultimately, for a Monday, what a start to the week. And thank you so much, Jax.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that, Craig. Jax, I'm conscious we're about 4 minutes away from midday and the end of the session, and I need to wrap up as well for about the last minute or so. So just a couple of bits from me to finish off, really. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much again for what you're doing. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again up at the AFSA conference in West Yorkshire in a few weeks' time as well. So really inspiring stuff. One of the two things for me to reflect on, really, one is when we talk about the NFCC Culture and Inclusion Plan, one of the things that I know would give us a real opportunity with fire and rescue services is if and when we are able to collect together, even if it was just the 2 or 3 really good things that every fire and rescue service in the country thinks it's doing around equality, diversity and inclusion. And it can be relatively small stuff like your terms of reference for your EDI Spocks, or it can be something much bigger, much grander. It doesn't really matter what it is, but 3 things. And if we were able to collect those together and then package them up, and we've got groups of people that we can kind of work those through with and develop a kind of suite of good practice across the country that services can dip into to fill in some of the gaps in your own areas. I think that would put us in a fantastic position, and I think there's more to come from us in NFCC around that. And then the second piece, my ask of you, there's an opportunity here for 85 people to come out of this meeting and to just crack on with what will be a busy week. The other opportunity is to find a bit of time over a cup of tea and a bit of lunch or something like that, just to reflect on, actually, what's the one thing I could do differently? having reflected on what Jack's has shared with us today. And clearly, I think the fire service would be a better place if everybody, including me, takes a 10-minute opportunity to do that on the back of the investment from Jack into us today. So at that point, I'm going to sort of draw it to a close and say, Jax, thank you very much again for presenting with us today. Fantastic to spend a bit of time at Lunch and Learn and Black History Month with you all this morning. So I wish you all the very best. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.